When you're starting out in Rust, sometimes you want to do something with strings. Sometimes you get a string, sometimes you get a stir. Sometimes you get a U8, and you always get a WTF when you begin. Hi, I'm Buddy Lindsay of Go Rust, and I want to talk to you today a little bit about strings, specifically the difference between string and stir, and how they are used from a practical perspective. We're not going to dive deep into what strings are in Rust, because sometimes you just want to get started and you kind of need to get something running, and then we want to move back and do something else and actually understand what it's doing. So let's get started on a practical understanding of strings in Rust. First thing is we need this type of function. Don't worry about what it does and how it works. All we're going to use it for is so that we can print out a representation of what different types are. So just ignore that for the moment. We want to concentrate on getting started. In a lot of languages, you might do something like this to get your first string. This is normal. This is what you would do. If you were in Python, you would have something like this, except you wouldn't have the let. Let's say JavaScript, for example. You might have this in JavaScript. Awesome. So in other languages, you could just do this. You have your string here, and you would just add something to it. Just simple concatenation. Problem is, you have this weird create owned string from a string reference. Use the toOwned. What? What does that even mean? So just to point something out, let's go ahead and take a look at what this is in the console. There we go. We have hello world, and it is outputting the ampersand str. That means it's a stir type. Okay. Let's look at the other string real fast. So here we go. We literally have the exact same line of code, except we have a to string. It's like, what in the world? We're doing a string to a string. So let's run this. Now we have hello world with the ampersand stir and then a string, but it's basically the same. We have a string and a stir, string and a stir, string and a stir. What the crap is going on? Why is this even a thing? Let's look at a couple of more things, and then I'm going to backtrack. Here we go. Here's a little bit more code, and this is a little funky, I admit. So we're taking the string up here, we're referencing it, and we're trying to only pull in the first 5 characters. Think of string D as an array, or it's a vector, but think of it as an array if you're not used to Rust yet. And you just want from 0 to 5. That's it. You just want the first things, and then we want to output it. So let's go to the next one, cargo run. So we have hello world, we have the stir, hello world again from our second, and we have string, and now we're back to stir. So what is going on? Well, it's actually kind of simple and weird at the exact same time. What's going on is a stir, in this case, this one and this one, do the exact same thing. They are representations of what's in another area of memory. So it's a pointer to memory. So in this case, we're just saying, hey, for this string D slice here, I want you to look at the first 5 characters of this thing here. I don't want you to record what that is. I just want you to go over to that place in memory and pull out what's there. Same thing here. We're writing this to memory, and we don't care kind of where it goes, but we just want that reference to where it is in memory so that we can pull it back out. Whereas string D here on the other hand is written to the heap, and it is fully managed and owned by this variable. It is not a pointer somewhere else. It is the string, and therefore it is mutable. So you can change it. So everything by default in Rust is immutable. You can't change it. So to change it, we'll just do this. Add the mute. Now that we have string D as mutable, let's go ahead and modify it. And here we go. We have modified. We've pushed on to the vector or the array, whatever. It's a vector. We pushed onto the string vector that, hey, we want to do 3 more characters in here. And we're pushing on a stir, a reference to it instead of the actual string. The push stir will go in and say, oh, that's something that I need, and I need to add that to the other. So I'm going to make a copy of it and just jam it in there. And now we have it. So if we run this, boom, we have hello world from the string. We also have our now concatenated exclamation marks along with, and now this is a string as well. So we are kind of starting to get a feel that, hey, a string is a string that you can modify. A stir is a reference to somewhere in memory of a string that you want to do something with. I know this is crazy and weird and it's kind of stupid. It's not stupid, like, but when you're first trying to wrap your head around this, you're like, what is going on? Okay, let's keep going through some examples, because I found once I started playing with this, it made a lot more sense when I started diving through more and more examples. So for this example, we're going to do some stuff with some command line arguments. This is going to be a super common thing that you want to do. And so let's kind of work through what it is. So for these first two lines, you have data 1 and data 2. This is going to pull from args, which if you look up here in line 2, we have imported it there. So we're going to collect all the arguments from the command line, and we're going to say, hey, we want this as a vector of strings. Not a string that is a vector, but a vector of strings. And these are the mutable strings. These are the things that are in memory that we can do stuff with. It's self-owned, and we're not passing around references everywhere. I wanted to go ahead and throw this in here as an alternative way to write this, because this can kind of get confusing when you see it two different ways. But this does the same thing. You do args.collect, and then you want it as a vector of strings. Or you can define the type before the equals and do args.collect, and you get the same result out. So in this case, I just want to print out what these two things are, so that we can see, hey, they're both vectors, they're both the same thing. And then for these two lines, I am just going to iterate over the data in the first one, because since they're both the same. And I want to output what it is and then what the type is. So there we go. We have our command line arguments from the message that we put. And then we have what this is as a thing, and then what that type is. So if we'll change this, there we go. We now have what it is. We've iterated through here, add, they're both strings. And so now we're going to mess with and be able to deal with strings as our type. So you're probably like, awesome, I'm getting strings back. How does strings, full strings versus references get me anything? Let's look at a little more code. So for these two lines, we're saying, hey, out of the vector that we have, let's just get a reference to the second one in there, which is the command, the add from our thing. And then also, what is the argument for that? Let's just get a reference to it, because we don't need to do anything with it in the next part of our application. We just want to know what it is. So this saves time, memory, a lot of other things. And now that we have a reference to it, let's actually look at it. Let's inspect it. What is the value? And then what is the type? So here we go. We have our string slice. So we have add and hello. Those were each individual commands, add, hello. They were strings up here. We have now gotten a reference, so they're the stir type. So great. Now we have a stir and we have a string. What of it? Well, when you pass around arguments to other functions, you have to deal with the ownership model. And if you can just pass a reference, you don't have to deal with ownership quite as much. And so you just pass a reference to that string. We're not going to change it. So let's just do something like command execution. We're just going to pass it to command. That function is going to look like this. So here we're taking our command. We're expecting a stir, a reference. If the command is a stir add, then we're just going to print out add. If it's remove, we're going to do that. And then if we don't know what it is, we're just going to say unknown. So this is where we're passing by reference a thing that was a string. This can come in handy in all sorts of things where you want to do something based on what that string is, but you don't need to actually have that full string. So let's go ahead and run this. Boom, there we go. It's add. And now it's remove. So in this code, we have gone through collecting in a vector of strings, verifying what they are, verifying the type of the string, pulling out a slice of the string so that we can deal with them in our application without actually having to pass around that string and mess with doing an ownership of, or doing a clone, or doing anything else to do with ownership. We're just saying, hey, this is a string. We want a reference to it with the stir, and then we just want to pass it to another function. And really, that's all there is to the basics of string and stir. I mentioned the U8 earlier in the video, and basically that is an unsigned integer, and I'll go over that in a future video, but I wanted to let you know that that is kind of the base. If you see something that is like, hey, a string, and they use U8, that just means that it is a byte representation of a string. You could do some sort of character encoding into UTF-8, and it'll pull it into a string as you need it. Sometimes when I've looked at documentations, I've seen that U8, and I'm like, what is that? It is a binary representation of a string. So with that, I thank you for watching. Hopefully you learned something, and I will see you next time on the Go Rust channel. Have a good one.